Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Daybreak, President Park Geun-hye withdraws her nomination of under-fire Education Minister-designate Kim Myung-soo. She names the former chairman of the ruling party, Hwang Woo-yea, as the new candidate. President Park announces the lineup for her preparatory committee for reunification to build public consensus and to set the groundwork for a unified peninsula. Plus, Israel resumes its aerial bombardment of Gaza after earlier accepting an Egyptian proposed ceasefire as Hamas continued firing rockets. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Wednesday, July 16th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom and you're tuned in to Daybreak. And we begin with the latest on President Park's attempt to secure support for her updated cabinet. On Tuesday, she dropped her embattled education minister nominee, who'd come under fire for a series of allegations, including plagiarism. But she once again called on the National Assembly to endorse her appointments of her two remaining cabinet members who've been left in limbo for the last few days. Choi You-sun starts us off.
President Park's spokesperson Min Kyung-wook on Tuesday said the president had withdrawn Kim Myung-soo's nomination for education minister and second deputy prime minister after he was grilled by parliament over allegations of thesis plagiarism. President Park quickly named five-term ruling Saenuri Party lawmaker and former party leader Hwang Woo-yea as the new nominee for that post. Hwang's expertise in the field from his time as the chair of the Parliamentary Education Committee and his abilities as a mediator were highly noted. Selecting her political aide and a prominent figure within the party is thought to be a part of President Park's strategic move to expand her authority over state affairs. Hwang has also worked closely with Choi You-sun, who's been tapped as the finance minister and first deputy. Choi was the floor leader when Hwang headed the party. As for the two other cabinet nominees that remain unconfirmed over allegations of perjury and real estate speculation, the president requested that the parliament reconsider them. While midnight Tuesday is the deadline, the president is widely expected to appoint 7 of the 8 new cabinet ministers without parliamentary approval on Wednesday. Meeting with the ruling party's new leader Kim Myung-soo earlier Tuesday, President Park stressed the need for a new cabinet and the party leadership to cooperate on a series of bills related to the economy and another that came about in the aftermath of April's ferry tragedy. On Tuesday, the president also named a safety management expert as her new vice security minister and an administrative veteran as her new senior presidential secretary for personnel affairs. Choi You-sun, Arirang News.
Now, President Park Geun-hye has announced the lineup for her preparatory committee for reunification. This to build public consensus and to set the groundwork for a unified peninsula. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
The 50-member Joint Government Civilian Committee chaired by President Park has been tasked with seeking ways to systematically prepare for Korean reunification and setting a direction for the unprecedented process. 2 vice chairs have been named, Unification Minister Ryu Gil-jae, representing the government, and former senior presidential foreign secretary Chung Jong-woo, who is currently the chair professor at Incheon National University, representing the civilian side. 29 civilian members with backgrounds related to reunification issues will then be divided into 4 subcommittees, according to their fields of expertise: foreign affairs and security, the economy, society and culture, and politics and law. They will be joined by another group of specialized advisors for in-depth discussions and research, with an ultimate goal of formulating a blueprint for a unified Korea. On the government side, the Unification Minister will be joined by 10 members, including the Ministers of Finance, Foreign Affairs and Defense, as well as the senior presidential foreign secretary. As President Park had proposed during talks with the floor leaders of the ruling and opposition parties last week, the policy chiefs of both parties have been named as the two members representing parliament. 6 members from state-run research institutes have been tasked with boosting cooperation between the government and civilian sector. While not included in the 50-member list, the presidential office said advisors from civic groups, the media, and educational community will be asked to meet with the committee on a regular basis to offer their views on reunification. The committee will convene for the first time in early August to decide on its goals and direction. Incheon, Arirang News.
South Korea has opened the door for government funds to be used for humanitarian aid to North Korea for the first time since sanctions were imposed on the regime in 2010. Hwang Woo-yea reports on how the move could signal a possible shift in inter-Korean relations.
South Korea's Ministry of Unification said Tuesday it would use its government-led Inter-Korean Cooperation Fund to provide humanitarian aid to the North Korean people.
The Unification Ministry has repeatedly expressed the will to provide humanitarian aid that will be of practical help to the North Korean people and to cooperate in the agriculture and the livestock sectors.
The government plans to make a total of 3 billion won, roughly $3 million, available for groups that help in the medical, agriculture, and livestock sectors. This marks the first time Seoul will be using public funds for humanitarian aid to Pyongyang since heavy economic sanctions were imposed on the regime in 2010, following a North Korean attack on a South Korean warship. An official at the Unification Ministry said the move does not mean the sanctions have been lifted, but that the government is merely providing humanitarian support for certain sectors. Experts say it could lead to a shift in inter-Korean relations.
Talks of a peaceful peninsula and better inter-Korean ties are highly likely when the Pope visits in August and during the Asian Games in September. It's possible that the cross-border policies of President Park Geun-hye and Kim Jong-un will become more flexible in the process.
But stumbling blocks remain. Chances of more missile launches by the North and joint military drills between South Korea and the United States that begin on Wednesday are almost certain to complicate matters. Hwang Woo-yea, Arirang News.
US President Barack Obama has called on his Chinese counterpart to ensure North Korea meets its denuclearization commitments. The White House said that during telephone talks this week, Obama told Chinese President Xi Jinping that the two sides had to enhance their communication and coordination to make progress on the North Korean nuclear issue. Obama also said their bilateral relationship should be defined by increased practical cooperation and constructive management of their differences. US-China relations have come under a lot of strain amid maritime disputes in the South China Sea, accusations flying around about cyber espionage, various human rights issues and their strategy on North Korea. Obama and Xi are scheduled to meet in Beijing in November at an Asian summit. Now, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe says US troops stationed in Japan would need Tokyo's prior approval before engaging in any combat situation should an emergency arise on the Korean peninsula. The Japanese leader was speaking at a parliament briefing room on Tuesday. Prior approval is needed under the Tokyo-Washington Security Pact when dispatching US troops for combat. Abe also defended his controversial push to expand his country's military role, saying it is only limited in scope. He said Tokyo would require a formal constitutional amendment to engage in collective self-defense similar to that of other countries.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
Now, a new economic team working directly under President Park Geun-hye is set to launch on this Wednesday. The team is tasked with boosting public spending and getting Korea, hopefully, out of its low growth trap. For more on how they hope to do that, Hwang Woo-yea reports.
Korea's new economic team, which will be led by incoming Finance Minister Choi You-sun, has one goal: to spur growth. To achieve it, the team is expected to first fiddle with the nation's real estate market. Officials at the Finance Ministry say a set of economic policies for the second half of this year is expected to include measures like easing loan-to-value ratio limits for mortgage lending to 70%. That means homebuyers would be able to borrow up to $140,000 when buying a house worth $200,000. The current loan-to-value ratio stands at 50% for those living in the nation's capital area, which allows them to borrow just $100,000 when purchasing the same house. Homebuyers who are short of cash typically are forced to borrow money from non-banking financial institutions that charge them higher interest rates. Economic policymakers expect people moving their loans from non-banking lenders to banks to spend more, which would also lead to pulling the country out of its sluggish domestic demand trap. While many are concerned that easing housing loan regulations could lead to more household debt, which already hovers around $980 billion, the nation's real estate market is welcoming the government's expected move.
Easing regulations won't really lead to more household debt because there aren't a lot of speculative investments in the real estate market these days.
Economists still add that the government should also set up countermeasures to address the side effects that could occur from easing housing loan regulations. Hwang Woo-yea, Arirang News.
Now, popular messaging service Line has reportedly taken the first step towards going public on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. The initial public offering for the Japanese firm is estimated to be valued at nearly $10 billion. Reuters reports that the company applied for the IPO 2 weeks ago and has hired Nomura Holdings and Morgan Stanley to manage this filing. Line, which is owned by Korean internet search giant Naver, is also reportedly considering listing on the New York Stock Exchange. The move comes as the messaging app has rapidly expanded overseas in Asia and in the Americas, with the company boasting over 480 million users globally. Now, Line and Naver, meanwhile, have declined to comment on the upcoming deal. Korea's foreign ministry has decided to extend its travel ban to countries like Iraq and Syria for at least another 6 months, citing continued civil unrest. Koreans won't be able to visit Iraq, Syria and Yemen until at least the end of January next year, and to Afghanistan and Somalia by February next year. The Foreign Ministry, which announced its decision on Tuesday, says it expects political uncertainties, terrorist threats and public unrest to continue for the next few months. Now, on the cultural front, a new photo exhibition in Seoul is featuring the works of US photographer Jordan Matter, who first gained worldwide recognition for his project called Dances Among Us. He is premiering more than 60 new images in Korea, and our Park Ji-won sat down with him to find out what inspires him.
It's all about the joy and passion of being alive. None of these images have been digitally modified, and the dancers and the photos aren't relying on the help of wires or trampolines to enhance their jumps. Photographer Jordan Matter's works aim to reflect the beauty and wonders of everyday life, capturing what he calls that one magical moment.
You go through this series of events every single day that we just pass through without any sort of like recognition of their beauty and of the specialness of them. The magical moments means to me, stack all of the moments of your life up together and make each one as magical as possible.
First inspired by his 3-year-old son, who was living a life full of joy and full of wonder in the moment, Matter came up with the idea of taking pictures through the eyes of a child. He thought dancers would best represent the beauty of each passing moment.
They embody this kind of beauty and this emotion, and they're able to physicalize that and show us a story. And so it made perfect sense if I wanted to create and almost make the ordinary extraordinary in a way, and show everyday moments, but make them more extreme and more beautiful.
His works have touched the hearts of many, and his book, Dancers Among Us, made the New York Times bestseller list. He says for the best results, he always lets spontaneous moments happen.
All of it is serendipity. All of it is luck. If you can try to allow life to happen and then to react to it, as opposed to trying to hold on so tightly and control it, if you can let go of control a bit, then you will be very happy to see all of the surprises that await you.
During his stay in Korea, he will collaborate with Korean dancers and Taekwondo martial artists to capture more magical images that represent the wonders of life. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the international headlines we're following on this Wednesday morning. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim standing by at the news center. Good morning, Eunice.
Good morning to you, Mark. Israel has warned it will intensify its offensive after the ceasefire brokered by Egypt was torn into pieces with the flat rejection of it by Hamas. Israel resumed airstrikes on the Gaza Strip after suffering its first casualty in the week-long conflict. Police say a man in his 30s delivering food to soldiers was hit by one of the 125 rockets fired by Hamas militants since Tuesday morning when the truce was to have started. Israel had held its fire for some 6 hours before resuming its aerial assault in the afternoon local time. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he would widen and increase the offensive, vowing to destroy Hamas's military capabilities. Noting they were not consulted on the drafting of the ceasefire, Hamas said the plan offered no real gains for the faction, particularly on easing the border blockade held by Egypt and Israel that serves as an economic chokehold. Hamas leaders called for a sustainable new equation that prevents future clashes, as they called for additional mediation. A morning rush hour subway derailment has injured dozens and killed at least 21 in Russia's capital city. State-run Itar-TASS news agency reports 3 metro train cars derailed in a tunnel located in Moscow's deepest metro station, making rescue efforts 84 meters underground challenging. Dozens of ambulances and helicopters were dispatched to transport the wounded, dozens of whom were in critical condition. By Tuesday afternoon, the rescue operation became a recovery operation, as Moscow's mayor declared a day of mourning for the dead. Multiple Russian officials have ruled out terrorism as the cause. Some reports say a power surge was to blame. Moscow's subways are used by some 11 million people every day. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says there are very real gaps in the West's negotiations with Iran on the fate of its nuclear program, boosting the likelihood that a pact will not be reached by the July 20th deadline. America's top diplomat has been engaged in talks with his Iranian counterpart, joined by the foreign ministers of Britain, France, and Germany in Vienna to curb Iran's nuclear activities in exchange for ending sanctions. Negotiations will continue at least through Sunday. The main sticking point has been Iran's nuclear enrichment program, which Tehran has maintained it needs to make nuclear fuel and said it intends to expand. The U.S. wants to cut it, fearing it could be used to manufacture the core of nuclear missiles. Extra concern for mothers in Kansas this morning after a 9-year-old girl there was found to have died due to a brain-eating amoeba living in warm standing water. Hallie Youst had spent weeks swimming in several bodies of fresh water and died last week from an amoeba called Naegleria fowleri. Infections from the parasite is rare, but it happens when the amoeba enters through the nose and works its way into the central nervous system and around the brain. The impact is devastating. In the past 50 years, only 3 out of 130 infected people are known to have survived.
And a good Wednesday morning to you all as we kick things off with the Incheon Asian Games, as talks related to the North Korean athletes have been making the headlines a lot lately. And in the latest news, there's a possibility that the two Koreas might cheer together at the Incheon Asian Games. Now, according to a website called With Our People, North Korean table tennis star Kim Myung-wook expressed his desire to have the two Koreas cheer together during the Incheon Asian Games. Now, he stated that the last time the two nations cheered together with the unified Korea flag was one of the most emotional scenes in his life and would like to see it again. Despite the ongoing political tensions, it is possible that the two nations might come together to cheer on the athletes. And now moving over to the women's junior handball team. After advancing to the World Women's Junior Handball Championship finals for the first time in 23 years over the weekend, the South Korean junior team beat Russia for the gold medal and returned home with a warm welcome. At the center of it all was 20-year-old Lee Hyo-jin, who won her second straight MVP honors, this time after finishing off the World Championships with 64 goals. And of course, after leading Korea to a championship victory, she expressed her desire to play over in Europe, as many fans have their eyes set on Lee Hyo-jin to one day lead the senior team. And now moving over to the South Korean national football team. With manager Hong Myung-bo resigning from his post last week, the Korea Football Association has been looking for his replacement. And they might have the guy they've been looking for. And that man is Ulsan Hyundai Tigers head coach Kim Woo-gon, who has a ton of experience as a head coach, even with the national team back in 2002 as a temporary head coach. He's also won the Asian Champions League in 2012 after going undefeated and won the honor as the AFC Manager of the Year. Now, though it isn't confirmed just yet, sources say that it looks like the national team will soon have a new head coach. And now finishing things off in the KBO, with a couple of games canceled due to rain, as the NC Dinos and the Doosan Bears rained out, as well as the Lotte Giants and the Nexen Heroes. But the Hanwha Eagles continue their winning ways as they beat the SK Wyverns 8-3. So with that said, let's take a look at the Samsung Lions take on the LG Twins. And of course, going into the game here, second inning, bases loaded for Choi You-sun. He walks and it's 1-0 LG. Next batter, Baek Chang-soo at bat, and he walks as well. It is 2-0 without a single hit. Now, Oh-ji-won this time, a sac fly to right field. The score is Son Ju-in, and it's 3-0 LG. But the sixth inning, down 4-0 red hot Park Sung-min, and there it goes to deep left, gone, and it's now 4-1. When the eighth inning of the game, bases loaded for Choi You-sun, a double to left field. This clears the bases as the LG Twins cruise through 7-1, your final score. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning, I'm Lee Ji-hyun with your weather update. Well, southern regions will continue to receive monsoon rain from yesterday until this morning, and then it will gradually let up as we head into the afternoon. In the meantime, central region is expected to have a fair amount of sunshine throughout the day. So the many regions on the southern areas will have temperatures below 30 degrees Celsius, while here in Seoul and the surrounding areas we'll see a daily high rising to low 30s. Well, it should be a tad higher than yesterday, so let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The morning low here in Seoul is starting out at 23, then the high will rise to 32. Well, that's 2 degrees higher than yesterday, while Daegu and Gwangju will have a daily high of 29 and 28 respectively, and Busan should make it to 25 with lots of rain. Let's see how other regions are are looking. It seems like down on Jeju Island and Daejeon should see a high of 26 and 31 respectively. Dokdo will reach 25, while Mount Keungang tops out at 21 under lots of sunshine. Well, it seems like West Coast regions could see morning fog today, so please drive with extra caution on your morning commute. Well, that's all I have for you at this hour. Hope you have a wonderful day, and let's send it back to Mark in the studio.
Well, thank you very much, Incheon, for the weather there, as always. And those are the stories we have for you at this hour. Korea Today is coming up in about just over 30 minutes' time, and we'll be back throughout the day with more news bulletins. Until then, goodbye.